Well, it's good to be with you guys today. Happy Family Worship Sunday. Glad to have the kids in the room. You braved it, parents. You brought them in. And so if you are in a row with a family that has kids in here, give them a high five, give them a fist bump, tell them they're doing great, tell them that they're welcome here, and we're excited to have them here, because we are. We definitely are. Well, we're continuing on in this collection of sermons in the book of Proverbs that's all about thriving. And if you want to think about it this way, I know that if I have a problem with my phone, I go to Apple because that's the manufacturer. I want to know what Apple has to say about how to fix my phone. If I have a problem with my car, I go to Ford because that's the manufacturer of my car, and I want to know what does Ford have to say about how to fix this. If I have a problem with my TV, I go to Samsung because I want to know how to fix my TV. I go to the manufacturer. And so if we want to know how do I thrive in my life, we go to the manufacturer. I want to know what God has to say about how I'm supposed to live my life, how I can thrive in my life, because God does intend that for us. And so we've been in this series walking through what is God's wisdom for how I live my life in the real world, in real life situations. What does God actually have to say about how I can go about my life so that I can thrive? And if you remember at the beginning of this series, we talked about there was this framework we were building out of, a study done that walked through the 7 dimensions of human flourishing. So they did a study all over the globe. They condensed it down into these 7 categories that they said, if we get these things right, then somebody will feel that they are truly flourishing in life. And so we've walked through things like finances, like our careers, like contentment. And we've been trying to figure out, how does God guide us into these areas well? And so today we're looking at another one of those dimensions. We're looking at relationships. And we want to double down and click into a little bit closer one specific type of relationship. And that is friendships. Now, I told the first service, I understand if I was you and I was sitting in your seat and I heard somebody up here say, hey, we're going to talk about friendship today. I, as an adult human being, would be thinking, I got it. Like I'm old enough, I've lived enough life, I understand. Like, I think I got the friendship thing down at this point in my life. I kind of know how this works. I'm not as awkward about it anymore. I know how to make friends at this point in my life. I really don't need to talk on that. That's how I'd be feeling, except the truth is that we are living in a time when we are living in what is being coined as a loneliness epidemic. And it's fascinating because if you look at the studies, we all know how important friendship is to us. I looked at this study with you guys a few weeks ago when we were looking at contentment. But if you look at the rankings across the globe by country, okay, what do people say they need in order to have meaning and purpose and contentment in life? Interestingly, in the US and the UK, just behind family, the only 2 countries, the only 2 areas that did this in the world said that friends was the second most important thing in all of life to being content and having meaning. Friendship was number 2. Another study done by Barna finds that 61% of US adults rank friendship higher than their kids, higher than their marriage, higher than their finances as being important for finding contentment in life. 61% of US adults actually put friends higher according to this Barna study. So we clearly understand friendship really, really matters. And yet at the same time, we're living in a loneliness epidemic. If you follow the studies, it says that just over half of US adults can say that they have at least one close friend in their life. That means that if you look down to your right, and you can look to your right real quick, look at the people around you. If you look to the people to your left around you, half of the people that you're looking at right now would say, I don't have even one close friend in my life. And so 61% of us would say, this is more important to me, more important to flourishing than my wife, my kids, and my money. But just about half of us can say, I actually have a close friend in my life, just one close friend. So what's going on? Well, I think there's a few things happening in our world right now that are contributing to this. Here's some of the research and the stats that you can find yourself as well, but studies are done on this. US adults work on average 1,799 hours per year. Now, for context, there's about 8,000 hours in a year. So about 2,000 of those are spent working. That's 182 more hours than the global average, and 77% of Americans work more than 40 hours a week. More than 77% of Americans work more than 40 hours a week. Now, is that wrong? Not necessarily. That indicates to me that we have a culture that really values excellence. We value success. We value sacrifice. We value drive. We value work ethic. Good things, not bad things. But you couple that with a couple of other areas. When it comes to family, 49%, according to Pew Research, 49% of parents report spending more time with their kids than their own parents did. Now you read that and you think, this is a good thing, right? Yes, it is. We're glad that parents are spending more time with their kids. However, the time that is being spent with kids is what really matters. And what we're finding is that rather than quality time with kids, when we say that we're spending more time, what we mean is we're transporting them to sports, we're getting them to extracurriculars, we're taking them to ACT tutoring, we're making sure that we drive far enough to get to the best school that we can, we're making sure they're involved in everything that they can, and at the expense of adult relationships. Pew Research found this is what it said. This model of parenting leaves little room for adult friendships as socializing is increasingly deprioritized in favor of ensuring one's child gets ahead. What about tech? Well, we just did a sermon series on this not too long ago, so you know a lot of this research, but if you look back at it again, 40% of Americans now have online-only friendships. And the adults in the room, we want to look at the teenagers and go, yeah, it's weird. You guys have all these online relationships. That number, 40%, is all Americans. That's adults, that's teenagers, that's kids, that's across the board. That 40% of us say that we have online-only relationships now. What about screen time? Well, if you look at screen time, again, adults, we might think the teenagers are outperforming us in this area, and they are, but not by much. On average, American teenagers spend about 9 hours on screens every single day. Now that's phones, that's computers, that's TVs, that's all the above. 9 hours, that's a lot. But adults in the room, on average, we spend about 7 hours on screens in the day. So the teenagers are beating us, but by a very thin margin. We are all spending a lot of time digitally. And the same study had this to say, this is fascinating to think about, this cultural shift would not matter if digital friendships were interchangeable with in-person friendships. But online friendships require a different set of social behaviors than in-person ones. Maintaining a friendship online relies on skills like crafting the perfect message, interpreting text-based interactions. How many adults have had a miscommunication with their teenager over text before? Anybody? Yeah. If you've ever sent a period to somebody under the age of 20, they thought you were mad at them. They thought you were furious. Exclamation points exclusively or no punctuations, one or the other, otherwise you're mad. We misinterpret. And we engage in asynchronous exchanges with multiple people at once. In contrast, in-person friendships thrive on undivided attention and are built through spontaneous moments, reading body language, and navigating the vulnerability of face-to-face connection. So how is it that 61% of us say that friendship is more important than almost anything else in my life, and yet half of us can say that we actually have a close friend? Well, it's because we have an inordinate amount of time spent on work, which would be fine in and of itself, but it's coupled with, we have a heavy emphasis on our kids succeeding now. So a lot of our time is being spent making sure that they're set up, which again, not wrong on its own, but couple it with, now we have technology in the midst of it that's eating up, on average for us adults, 7 hours of our waking life every single day. And you combine these things and how much time is left over to build relationships, to build friendships. When the research says that it takes 50 hours to move from an acquaintance to a casual friend, it takes 90 hours to move to a full friend, and it takes over 200 hours to move to a close friend from an acquaintance. 200 hours invested in a single relationship is what it takes to move to a close friend, according to research. How are we going to do that when all of our time is spent everywhere else? We can't. There's not enough time in the day. There's not enough time in the year to accomplish that. And so what tends to happen is that despite the fact that we know how important friendship is, friendship tends to be the thing, as for us adults, that slips down the list immediately. It's the first thing we deprioritize because in our minds, friendship is a nice to do. It's not a must do. And yet the Bible comes into the picture and is screaming from page 1 that we are designed for friendship. Adam needed a helper. Moses needed Aaron. David needed Jonathan. Naomi needed Ruth. Paul needed Timothy. Elijah needed Elisha. And if you want to trace it, the only examples we have of people trying to do life without friendships are not the ones you want to be following, right? The story of Samson, tried to do it on his own, doesn't end well. Story of Saul, tried to do it on his own, doesn't end well. You walk through the Bible and the only examples of people trying to do it alone, it always ends badly. The whole Bible is teaching us that we can't do this thing alone in isolation. We need friendships. As a matter of fact, one of the highest compliments given in all of the Bible is to Moses in Exodus 33, when the writer says that the Lord used to speak to him face to face as one man speaks to his friend. Jesus, on the night that he was going to be betrayed, talked to his disciples and says, "No longer do I call you servants, but I call you friends." One of the names given to Jesus that they meant as an insult, but he took on for himself because he liked it, was that he was a friend of sinners. I mean, you walk through the Bible, this is everywhere. Friendship is all throughout the Bible. We sing a song. Some of us have sung this song. Maybe some of us might be too young for it, but what a friend we have in Jesus. This is all over the place. We know the importance of it. We understand this, but it's the first thing that we tend to move past, and it's easy for us to hear somebody on a stage say, "We're going to talk about friendship today," and we skip past it in our minds and we go, "That's nice. Like, I would have liked something more important than that." And if that's what we're thinking, we're missing it. Because God intends us to have friendship. He is telling us we cannot live out the gospel fully without friendship. We cannot become like Jesus in all the ways he intends without friendship. We cannot accomplish all of the mission of God without friendship. I didn't design it that way. God designed it that way. He intended that we have to do this in community, in deep friendship with other people. So if we're talking about God's vision for flourishing, friendship is one of the key parts in the Bible that God intends us to understand. We have to have this. It's not a throwaway 30 minutes. This is essential to life. So in a sermon series on human flourishing, that's why we need to spend time this morning talking about friendship, God's way. So we're gonna be in Proverbs chapter 27. If you have a Bible, you can go ahead and turn there. Proverbs 27. We're gonna look at two verses, verse 6 and verse 17 of Proverbs 27 this morning. And I just wanna highlight two things that these verses teach us to look for in friendship. Would you stand with me in honor of God's word? Now here's what the writer says. Proverbs 27, verse 6. The wounds of a friend are trustworthy, but the kisses of an enemy are excessive. Iron sharpens iron, and one person sharpens another. Father, give us eyes to see, ears to hear. Don't let us just throw this away. God, we need this. The stats say that 50% of the people in this room need this badly, because they don't even have one close friend. God, we need to understand that you have designed us for this, that this matters, that it's about obedience. That if we are surrendered to you, this is part of what we have to do. So Jesus, teach us to be obedient in this area of our lives. Teach us that it matters for your glory and for the good of others. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, two things that Proverbs teaches us to look for in friendships. Number one, point one here, is we need friendships that push us. We need friendship that pushes us. I don't know if you know this. Maybe you do, maybe you haven't thought about it, but we didn't invent friendship. That wasn't our idea. That was God's idea. Daniel Carnegie, didn't invent it when he wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. That wasn't the first time friendship was ever thought of. This actually came from a long time ago, right? God came up with friendships. He designed you with a need for it. And when he designed it, he was picturing friendship with a purpose. There was a reason for the friendship. The writer of Proverbs says it like this, verse 17 again. Iron sharpens iron, and one person sharpens another. The image is easy. You understand this. We all get what he's indicating. If you just leave, if you had a blade, a knife, a sword, whatever you might have, if you have a sword, we need to talk about that. But if you have a knife laying around, if you just leave it out and don't do anything with it, it will get dull over time. That's just what happens to iron. What you have to have is you have to have use for it, and you have to have something else to continue sharpening it so it stays sharp. Sitting by itself, it will always get dull. And so what the writer of Proverbs is saying is that's what you are like too. That sitting on your own in isolation, you are going to get dull. It's going to happen. What you need is you need a purpose, and you need other people around you who are going to continue to sharpen you. And when he's talking about that, this is what he's really meaning. Is he's saying, hey, you need people in your life who will, as Paul says, let the word of Christ dwell richly among you, teaching and admonishing one another. The writer of Hebrews says, encourage one another to continue meeting as the day draws closer. Jesus modeled for us calling people out and indicating to them, this is where you're going wrong. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't suggest this, but very critically, he said to Peter one time when he needed to correct him, get behind me, Satan. I don't think you should go home and say that to your wife or to your husband, but Jesus did say it. He modeled for us what it looked like to call people out. Well, what does this indicate? It's indicating to us that when we talk about sharpening, what we're talking about is somebody who is willing to encourage you, somebody who's willing to coach you, somebody who's willing to correct you, somebody who's willing to call you on things. Why? Because as we are journeying together after Jesus, we are wanting to be more like him. We are wanting to accomplish the mission of God. We need people who are going to keep us on the path. We need people who are going to call us back to the right direction. Because if you're like me, you tend to look around everywhere and you're distracted and you're looking over here and God's trying to lead you over here and you need somebody to go, hey, over here, buddy, look that way. We all need this in our lives. And the writer is telling us you need people in your life who are going to be calling you on this, who are going to be strategically entering in close enough to your life to be able to show you and tell you, here is where you are off track. And note that I said they have to be strategically close enough to be able to do this. You can't do this from distance. This is not a long distance relationship. This has to be close enough that people can actually see you, that they can understand you, that they can see the things in your life, which is right about where we don't like it. It's right about the point where I don't want this. What I want is not an iron sharpening iron friendship. What I tend to want is I want more like a throw pillow friendship, like this, right? Throw pillows, the bane of every man's existence. What's the point? Why do they exist? You throw them on a bed, they look nice, they're like kind of comfortable, not really. I don't want to take a nap on them really. I want an actual pillow for that, but it'll do in a pinch. They look good for company, but what do you do when you go to bed? Take them off the bed and you put them over to the side. Maybe even have a container that you put them in. You have to buy a container to put the pillows that you kept on your bed into so that you can sleep on the bed. It makes no sense. And yet, this is exactly what we're looking for in friendships. We don't want iron sharpening iron friendships. I want a friendship that looks nice, is slightly comfortable, and I can set aside when I need to. But when people are around and they ask me, hey, who's close in your life? I can go, oh, here you go. I got them right here. Here's the ones. But I don't want them that close in my life. I'm not gonna lean on them. I'm not gonna find comfort in them because it's not what they're there for. We tend toward throw pillow relationships, and God is telling us, I want you to have an iron sharpening friendship. That is my design for you. And this is a far cry from God's God's intention for us. This is a far cry from what he has for us, because a throw pillow relationship is never going to grow you. It's never going to advance you. You will never reach the potential that God has for you, the calling that God has for you, if all you have is comfortable, nice, and I can set them aside friendships in your life. That is not how it's going to work. You can't grow to be like Jesus in isolation, and you can't grow without people who are close enough to sharpen you. You can't do it. And the hard thing that we have to wrap our heads around, the reality is I can't say that I really want to grow to be like Jesus. I can't say that I am surrendered to God. I can't say that I am about the mission of God if I'm trying to do it alone or surrounded by people who are not going to push me. Because what that tells me is that I'm not that serious about it. Because God's design, he tells us here, is that you need someone to sharpen you. And if I'm gonna be fully surrendered and obedient to God, this isn't a question. This is, I gotta do this. If I want everything he has for me, I gotta do this. And so if I'm not, then I'm settling for less than he has, and I'm not all that serious about it. I'm missing something. We can't say we're surrendered to God if this isn't something that we're running after. It's not a matter of sharpening friendships being a best way. It's strongly recommended, but you're probably fine without it. What the writer of Proverbs is saying is there are parts of growing to be more like Jesus you will never reach if you do not have friendships like this. There are parts of living out the mission of God that you will never reach if you do not have friendships like this. And for some of us, we are still dealing with the same things in our lives, the same temptations, the same struggles, the same thoughts, the same longings. And we're wondering, God, I've prayed about this. I've tried to work on this. I'm doing all of this. Look at everything I'm trying. Why do I keep coming back to this? Why is this happening? And maybe part of the reason is God is saying, who's close enough in your life to sharpen you? Because if you don't have them, you're never going to get past this in the way that I intend for you. There is freedom. We sang about it. There is a way forward. But what if God's intention is that the way forward, what if God's intention is that the freedom involves, demands that you have sharpening friendships in your lives? It's not a nice to do. It is actually God's design for your sanctification. It's actually God's design for you living out your purpose. That's what the writer is arguing. We need iron sharpening friendships, and you need to look for iron sharpening friendships in your life. Second thing that we look for, and this is kind of figuring out, okay, what does iron sharpening look like in real time? Okay, second thing, we need to value friends that correct. We need to value friends that correct. The writer says in verse 6, the wounds of a friend are trustworthy, but the kisses of an enemy are excessive. The writer says the wounds of a friend are trustworthy, but the kisses of an enemy are excessive. That's a paradox. That doesn't make sense, right? Wounds don't heal. Wounds aren't supposed to be productive. They hurt, right? And kisses are intimate and good, right? So what does he mean when he says, well, wounds are trustworthy and kisses can be excessive, meaning that they're untrustworthy? Well, what he's saying is that sometimes a friend is willing to hurt you in the short term to keep you from harm in the long term. But somebody who's always your hype man is not doing you any favors. Example like this, I think about it like this. I don't know if you remember this movie, Free Solo. Anybody ever seen this movie before? Several years ago, this came out. It's a guy named Alex. He's a rock climber. And he decided that he was going to free climb El Capitan, one of the largest granite faces in the world. Now, free climbing, in case you're wondering, can't tell from the picture, means no ropes, no gear, just you and a rock face. And he climbed up that entire thing. You can watch the movie. If you have a fear of heights, I don't suggest it. It's intense. It's a little terrifying. But he climbed up that entire thing. Now, I struggle getting up the stairs, and this guy climbed up El Capitan with nothing. It's incredible. One of the most amazing feats I've ever seen, one of the most incredible things a person has ever done. And maybe you're like, why? Why did he feel the need to do this? I don't know. He's a guy, so probably because it was there. Is all the reason he really needs. But it's one of the most incredible things I've ever seen done. Now, can you imagine if I came to you after service and I said, hey, I watched Free Solo and I really want to free climb El Capitan. Like, that is my new life goal. As a matter of fact, I booked a flight next weekend. I'm going out. I'm going to try it. Now, I am 33. I have a fear of heights. I do not rock climb. And I'm also not fit enough to try something like that, even if I did rock climb. So if you look at me and you say, sounds great, you should go do that. As a matter of fact, I'll come with you. I'll film it from the bottom. I'll stand right there and I'll watch you the whole way up. I got you. You can totally do this. You should go try it. I absolutely believe in you. Now that would be very nice. I would feel great about that, right? Right up until the point where I fall from the mountain. Not high enough to really get hurt because I wouldn't get that high, but I would fall and they would get it on camera. What I should be wondering, if somebody said that to me today, is do they not like me? Because they're sending me to my death is what they're really trying to do. They must have a problem with me. If somebody said that to me, I should be concerned about that. What I would hope is that if I came to you today and I said, hey, I'm really thinking about climbing El Capitan, you would look me up and down and you go, I don't know if you should do that, buddy. Maybe we start with a pull-up and then we can work on this from there. Let's start somewhere. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you what, I'll work with you on it. I'll go to the gym with you. There's a rock climbing gym just up the road. Let's go. We can work on it together. And over time, maybe you can get to the point where you can do that. I'm committed to joining you in this, but you shouldn't try that today. That's a really bad idea. I would hope that my friends would be willing to hurt my feelings in the short term to keep me from harm in the long term. And that's what this verse is saying. It's saying that you need people in your life who are willing to love you enough to say, hey, that's a bad idea. Hey, you're doing this wrong. Hey, I've noticed this in your life. You need to work on this. Or I think God is doing this in your life. Or I've noticed this pattern and I'm not trying to get up in your business. I'm not trying to blow you up or put you on the spot, but there's something going on here that's more. Can we talk through it together? What do you need from me? How can I help you? We need somebody in our lives who loves us enough to enter in that way. Now, I understand that when I'm talking about El Capitan. I would hope that somebody would do that. But when it comes to my spiritual life, I don't know about you, but I don't like people interfering in my spiritual life and my personal life. I don't want people to have opinions about that. That's between me and God. That's between me and myself. You don't get to talk about that. I get to decide on those things. I don't really want anybody speaking into that. And I would never put myself at risk physically by trying to do something crazy like climb a granite face right now. And yet every single day I put myself at risk spiritually when I try to do it alone. That's the reality. That I am just as much at risk trying to do this journey with Jesus alone as I am at risk trying to climb a rock face right now with no ropes, no gear. And the reality is we just don't think about it that way. We don't take it as seriously as that, because if we did, then the church would be the place where we don't find loneliness. The church would be the place where we see people in deep friendship. The church would be the place where we see friendship being modeled better than anywhere else because we understand how serious this is. We don't think about it the way that God does. What God is saying to you and me is that friendship in your journey is essential to life. It's not an add-on. You have to have this. You need people who are willing to correct you. You need people who are willing to call you, because that's how we get sharpened, because that's how we grow to be more like Jesus, because that's how we further the mission of God. So two things that we do with this. Two things we do with this morning. And I would be wrong if I didn't point out to you, by the way, that the model of friendship for us, we find in Jesus. That in Jesus, we have a friend who meets us where we are and who says, you're not ready for all the things I have for you, but I'm gonna stick with you until we get there. We meet in Jesus somebody who says, I'm going to make a way forward for you. We meet in Jesus somebody who convicts us and calls us out and encourages us and coaches us and guides us and does everything that we need in a friend, who is loyal and faithful and loving and good. We meet in Jesus the model for what friendship is. We used to sing a song, you might remember it, I am a friend of God. He calls me friend. It's one of the most joyful songs I know, because that's one of the most incredible realities we have. That Jesus would be a friend of mine and allow me to be his. It's a gift. One which we should be incredibly grateful for. Two things we do with this. One, you have a built-in pool of people. If you are somebody who says, I don't even have one close friend like that, you can look around the room and find that God has given you a community of people to choose from. You don't even have to go far. You don't have to go find somebody. You don't have to get a recommendation or be set up on a blind friendship date by somebody. You have somebody in the room right now, and statistically speaking, half of the people in this room are looking for it as well. So what would it look like for you to be bold enough to grab somebody, like we're in kindergarten again, and you say, I need a friend? Can we set aside our pride and our insecurity long enough to say, I need a friend. I can't do this alone. Can we meet? Here's what we need. Here's the purpose. Here's how we're gonna do this. Can we walk through this together? I need your help. And I need a friend. So for some of us, that's our step today. You need to grab somebody and you need to say, I need somebody. I can't do this alone anymore, and I've tried and I'm done trying. It's not God's intention, and I want to thrive. For some of us, the application is this. You're looking around this room and there's somebody you see is missing. There's somebody you know who isn't plugged into life-giving community. Maybe they don't know Jesus yet. Maybe they're just disconnected. But you're sitting in this room and you're thinking about them and you're going, I know that they need a friend. Nobody wants to be the first one to reach out. So what would it look like for you to be the hand of Jesus to somebody, to invite them into friendship and say, hey, can we get breakfast? Go for a walk. Can we get coffee? We need community. I need community. You need community. What if we started meeting? For some of you, you are the leader in this today. And who's not in this room today that needs to be? And they need you to be the one who brings them into that kind of friendship. Now, ultimately, what this does for us, I love that this morning we get a model for this. You get a living example of this. Because truth is as we grow to be like Jesus, he has a habit of messing things up in the best way in our lives. He's a habit of interfering with my plans. And as you're being sharpened, as you are growing to be more like him, as you are leaning into the mission of God, as people are involved and they are encouraging you and coaching you, there is going to come a moment where Jesus gives you an opportunity that he's been leading you to, and he is going to look at you and say, are you ready for this? You have all you need. You have the friendships. You've been sharpened. I've been leading you toward this. Now it's time for you to step out in obedience. And today we get to celebrate one of your church members from this campus who is responding yes to the call of Jesus. I'm gonna invite Jay Fennell to come up. He's gonna lead us in a time to recognize one of your families who is responding in the most radical way possible to the mission of God and to growing to be more like Jesus.